Yes. Good girl. Good girl. Yes. Good girl. Hey, hey, hey. Good girl. There we go. Good girl. That's a good girl. Hey, hey. Good girl. Good day, beautiful people. Good day, beautiful people. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we have Miss Snow White here. Snow White is a 3-week board and train. And what I want to talk to you guys about today is how to get engagement from a dog, right? There's a few different ways you can do it, right? But with a dog like this that has nerve issues, and what I mean by good girl, I rewarded her just now because she offered me the sit position, right? And I didn't ask her to do it. So I want to reward that. Good girl, yes, go get it. I want to reward that, right? Good girl. Hey, hey, yes. Good girl. All right, so yes, what I want to talk to you guys about is how to get engagement from a dog, right? So one of my favorite tools, right? One of my favorite tools that I like to use is a slip lead, because what the slip lead allows for me to do is have the most amount of leverage, right? And what I mean by the most amount of leverage, here's the reality, folks. If she didn't have a leash on her, there would be no way outside of just having food that I would be able to keep her engagement. Now, here's the challenge with food. If you don't have a dog that's highly food motivated, right, even food is not gonna keep them there, right? So, and this is why I don't use a whole lot of treats. If you notice, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but this is just her kibble, right? Anytime I get a dog in for what I call a behavioral management program, you will hear most other trainers say behavior modification, right? I despise the term behavior modification. The reason why is because, truth be told, when you have dogs that have deeply rooted genetic issues like this, essentially what you're doing, you're just learning how to manage it, right? You're learning how to manage it effectively. You're not really modifying the behavior. The behavior is always going to be there because that is who they are genetically, right? So the neurotic behavior, the fear behavior, right? The fearful behavior, the anxiety, right? The nervousness, all of those things are always going to be there. Essentially what you're learning how to do is manage the environment around the dog to decrease the stimulation around that dog so you can manage the dog more effectively, right? But in order to do that, you have to get the engagement of the dog. You have to get the attention of the dog, right? Because if not, all the other things that we like to do with the dog as far as obedience, sit down, come, all of that stuff, it doesn't mean nothing if the dog doesn't trust you and give you its attention, right? So that's what we're building here with Miss Snow White. Good girl, yes. And we're using food as a motivator, and we're using the slip lead as a tool of physical contact, right? Because we need both, right? And the goal is to use both with as much balance as you possibly can. And I'm careful with how I use that word balance because it's a buzzword in the dog industry, right? So, but I try to use balance as much as I possibly can, right? Which means I don't lean too much on food and I don't lean too much on aversion tools like a leash, right? Because whether we want to admit it or not, right, a leash is an aversion tool. Why? Because it is stopping the dog from doing what it wants to do, right? I am forcing the dog to do something that it doesn't necessarily want to do. But the trick is making sure that I am not being excessive with that tool. And that goes for any tool, right? Any tool that we call an aversion tool, whether it's a choke chain, whether it's a pitch collar, whether it's an e-collar, right? All of these tools are what we call aversion tools, right? And all of them can be beneficial if not used excessively and maliciously, right? That's where a lot of these tools get a bad name, because you get trainers that are not good trainers, right? And they don't know how to have a holistic approach to training a dog, right? And they only know how to essentially abuse a dog to get them to do what they want it to do, right? And that's where a lot of these tools get a bad name. So I am not opposed to using any tool right? Within reason, right? Because every tool can be used to your advantage if used with proper discernment. And that is the key, right? Hey, okay, good girl. And that is the key, right? So let's get to it. How do you get a dog's engagement, right? So as you see, I'm doing a combination of using food to redirect her attention this way, right? And I'm also using the leash, right? Doing the concept, what I call the aggressive tap on the shoulder, right? And basically what that aggressive tap on the shoulder is equivalent to is, let's say someone was calling your name and you were hyper focused on doing something, right? Let's say you was playing video games and you're at the final stage, so you're trying to beat the final boss. So you're locked in on the game, right? Because you don't want to lose. You're at the final stage. You finally made it to the final stage, so you don't want to lose, because it's like, when is the next time you're gonna get to the final stage, right? So you're locked in and somebody is calling you, your husband, wife, whoever it is, they're calling you. And you're not responding because you're so focused on beating that stage to win the game, right? Good girl, that's a good girl. Yes, that's a good girl. You're so focused on beating that stage, right, to win the game, you don't hear that person calling you. Now, eventually that person is gonna come closer, because it's like, I know they hear me calling, why they're not responding? So they're gonna keep coming closer until they get close enough to you to touch you, right? And then when they touch you, it's like, hey man, I was calling you, right? So it's the aggressive tap on the shoulder, and that's essentially what this is. This is me saying, hey man, I'm demanding your attention. Good girl, right? I'm demanding your attention. Give me your attention, right? Now, with the aggressive tap on the shoulder, you also have to use another concept, right, that I call, and I can't say I made this up because I didn't make this up. I was taught this concept, doing the least to get the most, right? And basically what that concept is saying is, when I go in for that aggressive tap on the shoulder, I'm not going in with all of my physical strength saying, hey man, I was calling you, right? That's not how that works, because then that becomes unfair to the dog. So what I'm going to do to gauge, to see how much force I have to use to get that dog to give me its attention, right? You see it's following my hand, so that's called luring, right? That's another way to get a dog's engagement, right? So what I do is start with the least amount of tapping on the leash, right? And then I gauge every time I tap on the leash, I take it up a decibel, I take it up a level, right? So if this is a 1, this is a 2, right? I'm gonna keep testing to see how high do I have to get before she breaks that concentration on whatever she's concentrated on and directs it towards me. And then when she directs it towards me, right, as soon as she says, oh man, hey, what do you want? I want to reward that, right? Because what I'm communicating to her is, hey, look, thank you for giving me your attention. Let me reward you for doing that. Because you don't have to give me your attention, even though I use the leash, right, to physically break your concentration, right? What I'm saying is, thank you for giving me your attention, because eventually I'm not gonna have to use this leash, because when I call your name, you're gonna be so excited, because every time you give me your attention, I reward you for that. So eventually this is gonna go away, right? And that's where using your discernment, not overusing this adversive tool, because this is a leash and a collar is an adversive tool, because it is physically forcing the dog to do something that it does not want to do necessarily, right? You're making the dog do this for your benefit. And by default, it's the benefit of the dog, but the dog doesn't see it like that. The dog wants to do what it wants to do for its benefit, because it has its own objective, right? So you are being adversive to the dog's objective, right? For good reason, So yes, so the aggressive tap on the shoulder, right? So perfect example, and I'm just gonna keep tapping. There you go, good girl, until she gives me a behavior that is favorable for what I'm looking to do. So she gave me eye contact. It was quick, right? It wasn't an intense stare, but it was quick, and she sat down, right? So those are behaviors that are favorable for me. So I want to reward that, right? And that's where hand feeding becomes so important, because it just creates that bond with the dog, right? Everything that's good comes from my hand, right? That's what I want the dog to begin to associate with me, right? So that is one way, right, that you can begin to build engagement with your dog. Of course, any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Any suggestions that you may have for something that you want me to do a video on, right? Make sure you comment below, and I will do a video on that subject for you, right? Good girl. And until the next video, you are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. Stay safe, better yet, stay dangerous. Peace and prosperity. That's a good girl. Yes. Good girl. That's a good girl. Yes. That's a good girl. That's a good girl. Hey, hey.